Hey guys, it's Deb Constien tuning in from EULAR day 1, and I am doing my debrief now. You're going to see me looking over here. My computer's over here with some slides for little triggers for me, and I wanted to let you know more about the session that I saw on the nutrition and microbiome. So there were 3 parts of it. The first one was very basic and would be really hard to explain. The second one, there were some key terms that I wanted to just go through with you guys. And the second section was called Targeted Microbiome Interventions and Their Impact on Treatment Response and Prognosis, Examples Beyond Rheumatology. So that's what that part was about. And the one piece that really stuck out to me was it talked about microbiome interventions from global to targeted treatments. And the global interventions, this is a new term to me. They said it's going towards precision nutrition. So again, creating things that are very specific to you as the patient. I found that fascinating because there's always been precision medicine that we always hear about. Things in this global interventions include whole diet, the gut, fermented foods, lifestyle, probiotics, things like that. And when we talk about targeted interventions, we're talking more about engineered probiotics as well as antibiotics and like mechanically engineered probiotics that are made specifically towards you as well. So that was one thing. And it was talking about precision nutrition and cardiometabolic diseases, and I'll explain that in a second. And it was talking about the microbiome composition, predicting biomarkers and things like fasting and lipidemic and inflammatory indices, so all of your markers that you have in your blood. I found that really interesting. The definition about cardiometabolic diseases are a group of conditions linked to metabolic disorders and cardiovascular issues, including heart disease, stroke, diabetes, insulin resistance, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So really interesting topic that covered a lot of things. But the third piece, I think, is really what we could dive in a little bit deeper. It was nutrition and the prevention and management of inflammatory rheumatic diseases. Speaker was outstanding and just covered so many different pieces. First section, what do we know about nutrition being diet and supplements for prevention of our diseases, our inflammatory diseases, like dietary patterns, dietary content, the vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids. I know we've heard about those things before. This dives deeper and has some great resources related to that. This person was from the speaker. She had some cohorts. So there's a nurses' health study cohort that included 121,700 women aged 30 to 55 in 1976. Then there was another cohort that was 116,761 women aged 25 to 40 in 1989. So very detailed, they're nurses, detailed diet reports and lots of questionnaires and things like that. So they did find that RA and lupus validated the cases that they had in chart reviews. So to prove the facts for a study, they actually did chart reviews to find the deep dive on who ended up getting rheumatoid arthritis and how many people got lupus. So incredible information there. The second one that was really incredible was a cohort that they had of Black women health study. 64,500 Black women aged 21 to 69 recruited nationwide, and it was from 1995 to 2015, and they had a lot of self-reported new cases of lupus confirmed by the medical record review and by 2 rheumatologists. They found that the mean age of diagnosis was 43, and there were 127 incident lupus diagnoses, as well as, 31% of these lupus patients had nephritis at the presentation of the disease, meaning kidney disease. So good stuff. There was some different patterns of medicine that they looked at. They looked at the dietary quality scores and patterns examined in the nurses' health studies, and they found, no surprise, the Western diet. They had lots more instances of air foods and desserts, sweets, refined grains, processed meats, French fries, condiments, things like that, and pizza, that they were much more, they got diseases like RA and lupus much more, which, again, no surprise. Let's see, what was another one? They looked at the lupus scores. There was no significant relationship with the risk of lupus, and they did notice that the Black women cohort that I talked about, they did have a higher glycemic load. So they were a little bit higher on the sugars in their diets and in their blood, in their labs that showed up. So it caused an increased risk for lupus in general because of that. A term that I hadn't heard before is ultra-processed food. So if you think about like corn on the cob, that is minimally processed. The processed is like a can of corn, but the ultra-processed is like Doritos, potato chips, things like that. And definitely all of these things are associated with cancer, obesity, diabetes, increased mortality. So not great news there. But again, a lot of people have a lot of these things that are significant in their lives. So what do we know about the effects of treatment of rheumatic diseases with diet and supplements? And this goes back to some of the things that we've heard before about the vitamin D and the fatty acids. So it talks first about how does inflammatory rheumatic disease develop and how does it spiral out of control? So it starts with a genetic disposition typically, then goes into the environmental triggers that are around us. The innate immune system is activated, then the adaptive immune system's activated. You have your immune complexes and you have clinical disease onset at that point. Then there's amplification of the disease in your body with irreversible tissue damage. And the sad part is this is cyclical, so it keeps happening over and over. So that's how our diseases spiral out of control. There were some studies. So one study, or actually a summary of 20 studies that talked about trials of omega-3 fatty acids for RA, and all of these studies had strong evidence of a beneficial effect in RA, being fatigue and disease activity, pain, all those big triggers. So really interesting information. Now, there was a summary of 9 studies of the trials of omega-3 fatty acids, and we're talking about the capsules. It can also be found in things like salmon and real fatty fishes. So fish, I guess, that's the plural. Sorry, it's after 11 o'clock here and I'm a little tired. Sorry about that. But for the outcome for that for lupus showed 6 of the 9 studies showed clinical or biomarker benefits. So there's things in our body that their lab work and things like that, again, the fatigue, pain, inflammation, all those things, it showed that there was a beneficial outcome. So gotta love that. The summary of that session was healthy lifestyle and healthy diet, obviously, especially fiber and fish likely reduce the risk of severe autoimmune diseases and reduce the inflammation in disease. The avoidance of those UPFs, which was the ultra-processed foods. That's what we're talking about there. So avoidance of those things, the super processed foods. Long-term use of about 2,000 IU per day of vitamin D, and it does reduce the incidence of autoimmune disease by 22%. That's significant. There were varying dosages and the duration of vitamin D that had been tested for treatment of lupus and RA, and there was no real strong, consistent effects, but it definitely did have benefits on their pain scores. The DAS survey that you fill out about how much it's causing effectiveness. The fish oil supplements are likely to decrease risk of systemic inflammation driven the inflammatory rheumatic disease and was proven to decrease RA disease activity. So the tenderness of joints, our pain, those type of things. So it was an excellent session, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have after you see the debrief come through. That comes out tomorrow, I believe, our day 2, as we're learning more information and more information to report back to you. I'm tucked in a little room in the kitchen here. The other side is where everybody else is, and they're getting all of their things organized as well. So great to see you guys here, and tune in tomorrow. Got more to report.